Playing some air guitar. I love it. Hello and welcome to Conf T with your SC. I am your host, Bryan Young. This is episode 60. It's hard to believe it's been 60 episodes, and here we are. We actually have a very special guest. Steve, I'm not going to butcher your last name, even though you told me how to pronounce it, because then you told me your nickname, and I forgot that. And I'm like, okay, it's Steve Stars. I'm going to go with Starman here. Steve, can you introduce yourself and pronounce your last name for us,
Sure,
please?
of course. Steve Staurovsky, and I work for Fortinet. You can call me Starsky.
Starsky, that's it, Starsky.
If I had
Awesome.
a
Yeah,
buck
Steve
for
and I
every
got a
time,
chance. Let's
if I had
start. Sorry, go ahead.
I said if I had a buck for every time somebody asked me where's Hutch, I'd have a lot of bucks.
Where is Hutch? Hold on, I have to get $1 here somewhere.
Yeah, yeah.
Steve and I got a chance to meet a couple weeks ago at the CT Nug event. We were both panelists for that, which was really cool. It was the first time I had attended, and also been invited to be a panelist. And we got to sit up on stage and pretend to be experts, and it was a lot of fun.
And we did such a good job pretending. Here we are again.
Yeah, here we
Let's
are.
do it
Here
one
we
more
are.
time.
I mean, 60 episodes. I must be doing something right here. But yeah, no, it was fun. I mean, I think the moderator did a good job of
Yes.
really taking those questions and just basically throwing them away and bringing in some new ones that really threw us all off guard a little bit. But they were at least questions that we had answers to, because
Yeah.
I remember that initial list, and I was just like, wait, what? I
Do
don't.
you want to talk
What?
about, I think it was RDMA, which sounded like a very cool technology, but just
Yeah.
something that's totally off my radar and my customer's radar. So,
Exactly. Like we're not. I'm not talking to my customers about white box solutions. I'm just not. I mean,
yeah,
I think there's definitely a use case for them, but I'm not talking to my customers about that. And most customers aren't going to be putting that in a production environment. At least not any, not any serious ones. So,
no, no, agreed.
but it was still an interesting conversation. But Steve and I hit it off, and we got a chance to talk. And I had you heard about the podcast before we had met, or no? I don't recall.
The only time I heard about it, I just went through everybody's bio who was going to be on the panel and just tried to see, what do they do? And I saw that you had a podcast. I thought that was kind of cool. So,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was cool. He came right up and was like, "Hey, I wanted to say hi. I'm on the panel with you." And I was like, "Dude, come on over, sit down, have a beer. Let's chat." And our table ended up being a pretty hopping place by the end of the night. Just
yeah,
people coming by and chatting. So I wanted to. Steve and I obviously have been gotten a chance to get to know each other since then as well. With him being at Fortinet and me now being at Driven, and of course learning about the Fortinet portfolio. And it's been it's been a fun ride, and we just wanted to take the opportunity to have Steve come on the show, talk about what is going on at Fortinet. So, Steve, why don't you just give us kind of a quick rundown on what Fortinet is doing? I mean, I think pretty much everyone knows about the FortiGates, but
yeah.
what I was a little surprised to know was that there's quite a broad portfolio that Fortinet has to offer.
Yeah, you said it very well. Fortinet has a lot of different items in its portfolio. We joke that there's 40, 40 plus, but everything from the firewall, the FortiGate, which we're known for, to hardware switches, access points, cameras. You can have a 40 phone, whether it's a hard phone or a soft phone, and then we have a slew of SaaS offerings, DevSecOps type offerings, endpoint, EDR, malware sandbox, network detection and response tools. So it's really, it could be your one-stop shop if you wanted to. We know, I focus on enterprise customers. We know we're not the only game in town, and we
Hmm.
know we're not going to be the only vendor in your environment. But if you really wanted to make my day, Fortinet could be the only vendor in your IT environment. So,
I like that mindset, right? I think that's great. If you really want to make my day, we,
yeah,
we absolutely could do it.
my mortgage company would be very, very happy. But on the flip side, like Fortinet knows they're not going to be the only game in town, and
Right.
we play well with others. Everything has an open API that you can, go hit right now and read all about how the products interoperate with each other. We interoperate with our competitors. Some of our NAC solutions were built first for Palo Alto, some of the NAC integrations. So we've definitely reached across the aisle, so to speak, to show integrations with both, non-competing products and vendors that we would typically compete with.
Yeah. And I think it's important because I know, in my time at Cisco, there was a lot of, you know, Cisco was always known for just having their own thing, right? They had their own sandbox, they did their own thing. It was a closed environment, didn't play well with others, but definitely in the time that I was there, they were trying to shake that off. And in those 7 years, I think have made great strides in, doing that. And I would be, I wonder how much of that is, from companies such as Fortinet doing that really kind of off the bat in terms of just, hey, we understand that we're not going to just be the only vendor here. We need to work well together, and we need to kind of figure out how to make this work, because just forcing a customer into a single ecosystem, it doesn't work like that anymore. It used to. I think you definitely could make the argument that that was kind of what you did. But in the 7 years I was at Cisco and the hundreds of customers that I talked to, I saw both sides, right? I saw customers that were just, hey, I'm just going to grab whoever's in the Gartner Magic Quadrant in the
Oh
topmost
yeah.
upper right, and I don't care who it is. I'm just going to grab them, and if they don't play together, they don't play together. It's some customers that were looking for those integration points, and and definitely some customers that were just like, hey, I want to go into an ecosystem and stay there and be comfortable there. So you really got options, and the fact that you've got Fortinet here playing well with others, I think that's definitely notable and worth considering. So that on the security side, because you obviously have tons of products even just outside of the security space, but what are you kind of seeing, especially with your customer base, that is really kind of making up the prevailing cybersecurity threats that you're seeing?
I'll break it into two. I think one topic that I constantly get asked about is operational technology, the OT environments. This used to be called the IoT. We're going to let everything come into your network, and originally it was mostly cameras. And I remember working with a customer who needed Xbox 360s on their network for a reason, like in the break room, and they needed those to be secure. But now it's more these industrial control type processes, whether it's a manufacturing environment or in a healthcare setting where it's an MRI machine or a dialysis machine that is on your network and needs to be either accessed securely by the vendor and to do a firmware upgrade, or it needs to talk to like in a healthcare setting, it needs to take its radiology info and put it to a PACS server so doctors and radiologists can actually look at the data. Those are probably the biggest scenarios I see. How can we secure our operational technology environment, an environment that was never really meant to be wide open on the internet? And
Right.
um, surprise, it was easier to put it on the internet, and from a management standpoint. So
It's got Wi-Fi. It's good.
yeah, we can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. So
No.
how do we secure it?
Yeah, and I think all of those we've covered IoT and OT, both in the manufacturing and industrial space. I don't think we've actually ever done anything in the medical space. That'd be a good topic to dive into at some point. But I think the challenges, especially in the OT or IoT area, are the fact that when you're looking at the IoT space, where it's just, hey, here's a camera, here's a thermostat, here's a smart device I've got all these cool things I can do with it, right? Those products, depending on the vendor, who knows what software stacks are loaded
Exactly.
in there, who knows what kind of penetration testing they're doing, or how much they're looking at their own software and what's in their stacks to make sure that things are secure and up to date. On the OT, especially in the manufacturing side, organizations and I had the privilege of working for one for a number of years that did manufacturing here in Connecticut, and really understanding and seeing the problems firsthand, is that when you have a machine, right, whatever it is, within the manufacturing floor, that asset gets sweat and runs a lot longer than most life cycles for anything IT related. So it's very possible that you'll have a machine that's connected to the network that's 15, 20 years old, or at least you'll try to do that, right? Who knows what standards will change. And again, same problem. Who's responsible for updating that? And if it can't be updated, it's absolutely mission critical that I keep that asset on the network. So how do I secure it? How do I make sure that this device that may be wide open and it's going to accept unauthenticated SCADA traffic from anything, right? How do I protect that asset, because I absolutely needed to have it online? And that was something I ran into in that role many times. I mean, we had an old Dell Optiplex GX1 running Windows 2000, and it had to be plugged into the network. It had a custom-built ISA card to interface with a big thing on wheels that had all these connections for sensors for an engine, and that's what they used it for. It was their mobile test bed. And I say mobile because the thing had wheels on it. That's about it.
That's cool.
But it had to run. It had to be there. And they're like, listen, we're going to keep this going until this thing completely just dies, because we can't get a replacement card. We can't put in a replacement PC because who makes ISA slots anymore? So, yeah, it's definitely an interesting problem with the IoT and OT space. So anything specific that you're seeing besides, or is that pretty much in line with what you're seeing?
That's very much in line. I have two idioms. I'll say we're either going to rock it till the wheels fall off, which is very apt for your your mobile card on wheels, or I think it was Biggie who said we'll let the tape rock till the tape pops. And so that's I definitely see Windows XP more probably than anything. I've seen a couple 98s that, for God bless them, they're keeping that hardware alive, and even in a rugged scenario and rugged environment. But the companies a lot of times don't exist anymore that sold the gear in the first place, and it would be extremely expensive to get a current gen compatible or closely compatible. They'd have to re-architect their manufacturing process around something new. So that's involves downtime, and a lot of these manufacturing places, they measure downtime in dollars, where if my PC goes away, Fortinet's not losing a ton of money. I don't get to work for a little while. I could probably play on my phone, but you're not building widgets on your phone at these manufacturing companies. So yeah, they don't like downtime, and I understand.
No, they certainly don't, and especially when they're looking at things like preventative maintenance, which and that's always the problem too, is that on the with the OT, and this is going to divulge into an OT conversation, and I'm perfectly fine with that.
That's cool. Yeah.
The issue that we've always run into with OT is that those realms are very, very different, and OT and IT don't necessarily interact as much as they should. And I think things like preventative maintenance schedules, that's what the OT is looking for, right? But they're going to do preventative maintenance on something that's at like 3 a.m. on a Sunday, right? Third shift. Generally, IT speaking, doesn't have people on third shift.
No,
it's something that waits until morning. Normal people get in, but I think that's definitely a source of, I don't know if contention's the right word, but it's definitely a problem. It's a rubbing point, because you're going to have those areas where IT and OT just aren't looking at the same thing in the same manner, and you're going to run into these issues. That same manufacturing facility that I worked for, at the time they were still running Lotus Notes, not for email, thank God, but because they had built a ton of databases in there, custom databases, I think 300 or 400 of them.
Wow.
That were vital to the business. And the problem we had was, where do we put all these? Like, there was no single solution that would just ingest it all. And it's like, dude, why isn't there? That's the thing that didn't make any sense to me. I'm like, why was this so easy to build here? And if I bring it anywhere else, I'm looking at, at least a dozen solutions. as it was, just getting the help desk off of that was a feat in itself, and trying to get people to, hey, let's use this over here. Come over here now. But supporting that legacy application, not to mention our ERP system before that, before we had upgraded, it required a very specific version of Java that at the time, and this was probably, this is like 10 to 12 years ago. That version of Java was 18 months out of date, and it required that version. If we updated it, and we had to go so far as to using SCCM to modify the registries to not allow for auto update to function, because it would try to auto update, it would do it in the background. Next time the user went to go in,
yeah.
I can't access this, and we're just like, oh, crap, now we got to go in and roll it back. So, but this is the thing, right? Supporting those legacy, supporting those legacy applications as well as legacy hardware, that creates huge security vulnerabilities and gaps. And this was, as I said, 10 to 12 years ago, where ransomware, I think at the time, was just kind of like, hey, this thing I heard about, on the news. It wasn't really.
It wasn't front page
enough.
Every day. Yeah.
Right.
Now it's 10 times a week somebody's getting ransomware. So
exactly. I mean, I think pretty much everyone that listens to this podcast has at least once firsthand seen a ransom message pop up.
Yeah.
And it's so much more sophisticated now. All the different threat vectors and everything else, it's a lot more sophisticated. And those malicious actors, they are definitely going after those OT types of environments. We noticed that. Oh God, what was it? I want to say it was the beginning of this year, back in January, February.
You're talking about Colonial Pipeline? That was a big
Colonial Pipeline
was that last year?
One. Yep, that was last year. I was thinking of the there was a ton of hospitals, especially in the Northeast, that were getting hit.
Even
hit
right
hard.
Here in Connecticut, there was one of them got hit. So
yeah, there was a recent one. I remember talking to my old colleague at Cisco, and he was telling me about it, and he was just laughing. I was like, yeah, I was born at that hospital. So,
back in the paper chart days,
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny too, because if you look at my birth certificate, it has the wrong birth date on it, and they kind of just scratched it off and wrote above it, and I'm like, how does this pass? Like, I've gotten some weird looks when I've used that to kind of get like a passport or something. I'm like, dude, it was done in the 80s. What do you want me to say? I mean, I was there, but I couldn't do anything about it.
I could not influence the situation. Yeah.
It doesn't help that my mother and I share, like, we're one day apart on the birthdays, and that's what I think screwed them up, is they were writing her birth date instead of mine. And, oh, no, wait, that's the wrong date. So it's always something. I swear, Murphy's Law follows me around everywhere. But, so that's the landscape today. So where do you see Fortinet really playing a role in those kind of scenarios that we talked about? And I know we covered a few there, but maybe let's stick with the IoT and OT space, right? Where do you see Fortinet playing?
I think for devices that you can't, such as those old legacy versions of Windows, our 40 EDR product supports going back to XP Service Pack 3, where that's a differentiator for us. You get the same results, same telemetry data. It operates at the kernel level, and thankfully, I know the kernel has changed since Service Pack 3, but there's most of the function calls are at least named the same. So that's an interesting.
So you're still actively supporting and developing for that platform?
Supporting, yeah. Today you can buy 40 EDR and it'll run on Windows XP, Service Pack 3, and later. So a lot of versions that Microsoft doesn't support. So it could be like a Windows 7 that's still kicking around, or
right.
I had a customer with Windows 2003 that was too big to fail for certain applications, and they bought EDR. So because some other vendors might not support it, because Microsoft doesn't support it, and that's a fine model. But Fortinet's, it worked at the time when Microsoft did support it, so they're still, you can still buy it that way.
Nice. That I think that's a very good point to mention, and I remember you mentioning it to me when we were kind of, prepping for this and talking about
Yeah.
stuff, but I'd forgotten about it till you mentioned it again. That's big because as we just went through the last 10 minutes talking about, there's going to be those legacy applications or those legacy assets that you're just running XP on, or you're running Windows 2003, right? And it's just mission critical. There was this there's a story I read years ago about this guy walks into this data center and there's a laptop in the middle of the floor on a chair, open, with its task manager, running, and the CPU is just pegged at 100%. And there's a post-it note that says, "Do not move, touch, or even look at this computer." And apparently the backstory was that they had no idea what this computer was doing, but when they unplugged it or turned it off, the entire network went down. So
Come on.
yeah, right. I'm like, what is this running, like the router?
Yeah.
Is this what is this thing doing that it is just pegged at 100% and the entire network relies on it? Now that's just horrible, horrible infrastructure management. But still, like, there's always going to be that one asset that you need to keep running. That's just so
do not
old.
touch. It has somebody's phone number taped to it. I've definitely been in data centers where I've seen, call whoever, call Bryan, and here's his phone number, here's his email. Like,
yep. I was at I set up the computer system at my church, and
okay.
for the live stream software they had this like troubleshooting checklist. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I'm looking over it, and like underneath everything where it says didn't work, it was like, call Bryan, gave my number. I'm like, dude, why am I on this list? I didn't even realize. And I always wondered, I'm like, oh, these people didn't know my number. They gave me a call. Yeah, that's why. It was that list. So yes, I've been on those lists. I know exactly what you're talking about. But yeah, I mean, having that kind of peace of mind, knowing that if I do have an asset that's not supported by the manufacturer anymore, such as XP 2003, and I think I just read that 2012 is going end of support this week, right?
Wow.
I think it's this week. So, which just makes me feel really old.
I was going to say, yeah. 10 years old, jeez.
Yeah. Good Lord. So that's going end of support. But just knowing that, hey, here's a solution that will continue to run on those out-of-date assets that are not going to get any more updates from Microsoft unless it's absolutely critical. See the SMB vulnerabilities.
I was going to say WannaCry. Yeah, that was the last time I remember seeing some XP patches come out.
Yeah, it's been a while, but
and that's
I think
good. 40 EDR is good for those white box, or where you can install on the client. But how many devices are black box, like your laptop scenario? We can't touch it, but we still have to secure it. Fortinet, I would say, are everybody's seen an Ethernet switch, two devices on the same VLAN can talk to each other, and they're basically fully routed. Fortinet has 40 link between its firewall and its switch. This is a really, I mean, we don't even talk about it a lot because it's such a blocking and tackling feature to us, but to some customers, this is like a very big differentiator where, all right, two devices on the same VLAN, we can push that traffic up to the firewall and create a firewall policy between that, so devices on the same VLAN don't necessarily have to talk to each other unless we create a policy for it. So
yeah,
a lot of times you can't remember that network.
Yeah, we were talking about that before because I mean, it's part of the defense in depth strategy, right? Because you can't just rely on your EDR, you can't just rely on your firewall. Like there has to be a multi-layered approach, and this is something that we talked about recently with Nile in terms of their infrastructure and how they're doing it. And Steve came to me. He's like, "Hey, like we can do that too. Like we have that capability with FortiLink." And I'm like, "That's really cool," because that's not something that I was really aware that anyone else is doing. And it makes sense, right? Where we can take that traffic and basically, even though it's going, from one port to the other, right, send it up to the firewall so that the firewall can enact its policy. In the same conversation I had with them, there's obviously, initial concerns of latency and bandwidth. Am I overloading the box? And of course, we haven't talked about this yet, but with FortiGate, we are looking at, ridiculous throughputs in terms of, the capabilities of being able to process that data. So it's kind of a win-win. And I asked you this before, but in order to do that kind of setup, we are looking at basically a full stack of Fortinet gear, right? In terms of, I need to have the Fortinet switches below the firewall, correct?
Yeah, the FortiLink setup is, FortiGates, and then your access layer would be Forti switches. Yep.
Cool. So, I think this is a great segue to talk about the FortiGates and kind of the differentiators there. So I'll kind of let you just go away on that. Tell us more.
So you and I have been doing, you and I have been doing networking for a while. We started when there was probably a 5-tuple firewall, and maybe even before that, just two IPs talking to each other.
I think my Linksys router is somewhere up there on the shelf.
Well, my NAT device was good enough to be a firewall, but
yes, NAT was a security feature.
Exactly. So firewall, the FortiGate firewall comes in, I guess, a variety of hardware sizes we can talk about, but I think in terms of feature sets, what I've seen in my career is you kind of had disparate boxes for functions, and they've kind of slowly, as hardware's gotten, better and cheaper, and we could talk about Fortinet's ASICs to, really specialize in specific security protocols like IPsec or TLS decryption and running the IPS engine. All of these different, IPsec VPN used to be on its own box. Your firewall, your web proxy, secure web gateway, to use the Gartner term. They were all disparate physical pieces of hardware, and now we've merged it all into one. It's like the old exhibit. I heard you like a firewall, so I put a firewall in your firewall.
One of the best memes out there.
Yeah. And it's great from all right, now we only have one vendor to choke, and we have a lot of different technologies available to us in a single spot, but it also is a Swiss Army knife. How many customers do you know are using every single blade on that Swiss Army knife? So
right.
We have a lot of them that use a fair number, but I personally haven't seen a customer use every single one, and that's fine. You can license. Our base license gives you, I think, like 80%, and if you wanted to do like every single thing with OT inspection and SCADA IPS protocols and signatures, then that's like the highest tier. So
yeah, it's funny you were describing that kind of how it was separate boxes and then it collapsed back into one, and it's funny how the industry in general has done that, right?
Yeah. Go back to mainframes. Everything was a single.
You start off at mainframes. Everything's just a dumb terminal. Then they get fully loaded PCs, and everything's specialized. And you have all these pancake or pizza box servers in your rack, and now everything's contracting again. You've got VDI. You've got hyperconverged infrastructure. You're not even using a SAN anymore. You're just using the disks on the server itself. You don't have compute server versus storage server. You just throw it all in there. Throw it all. Who cares? Things are getting more efficient and things are getting higher density. And then you got to wonder when at some point is it going to expand again? Like I don't understand. I mean, it just blows my mind. It's funny how we start off contracted, we expand, we come back to being contracted. What will happen next?
What's the Moore's law for IT contraction and expansion? We're hitting that cycle.
Yeah, I mean it's got to happen. I mean I just don't know what happens after that, right? And it made sense why we started with mainframes and terminals, right? Because compute was expensive. It was super expensive. It got cheaper. So we were able to give, massive amounts of compute when you compare against the times of mainframes, right? massive amounts of compute to every individual person. They had a tower at their desk that could do stuff that the computer 10 years ago couldn't even think of. And then you contract again because it gets faster, but it also gets less expensive. The price, continues to lower down, right? I think it's a steady rate down there. But you do it for operational efficiencies, and you contract it down. You get VDI, you get flash storage and ridiculous IOPS, and you can do all those things. I think some would say the expansion is the cloud, right? And that's kind of the expansion outward. And I think there's some validity to that. We've definitely seen how a lot of applications. I mean, look at what we're doing today. We're recording a podcast and we're just using our browser. It's crazy. So, and it's using all those cloud services. So maybe that's our expansion. Maybe that's the expansion back. Multiple clouds and everything else. So
it makes sense. We have everything. We've talked about the littlest manufacturing processes, but even those are sending telemetry up to the cloud. So yeah, that's your expansion.
Yeah, I had a very interesting conversation, and I'm hoping to get them on the podcast, so I'm not going to call out names, but if any of our listeners remember back to the Meraki conversation where we talked about Meraki Vision, there's a number of vendors out there that are doing a lot of AI training on visual models and doing things like being able to notice the number, not only just the number of people in a room, but how many people are wearing masks, or what is their demeanor. Like, and this was really cool. Like, it can look at someone and be like, this person is acting aggressive. So yeah, it was just mind blowing. But all of that stuff on top of the fact that there's the AI and the training model, that's a feat in itself. But all the data that I'm able to then recover from that and infer from that, and the actions I can take and the automations I can take from that, it really does require ridiculous amounts of processing that, that's why we leverage the cloud, because we've just got a lot of CPUs out there, apparently.
Somebody had to buy all those graphics cards. They had to go somewhere.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't tried to build a gaming PC in a very long time, but from what I've heard, it is difficult to get a graphics card without selling an arm and a leg. So,
I've been on a 5-year cycle. I'll buy everything but the graphics card, and then 5 years later, I'll buy whatever the best graphics card is I can buy at that time. Because basically, it's like the same price as the graphics card, and then everything else.
Listen, I was happy with my 8800 GT back in the day. I mean,
I had fine.
Yeah, I had two of those SLI together. I was good. I mean, I could run Crysis, and that was the benchmark.
That was yeah.
I think it still is. People still, well, can you run Crysis on it, right? Raspberry Pi comes out with a number 5, and it's like, yeah,
well,
can
does it run Crysis? Yeah.
I mean, that's the ultimate benchmark. So I ask you, your FortiGates, can they run Crysis?
I haven't tried. I wonder if Crysis has a ASIC optimization. Does the CryEngine support 40 ASICs?
Oh man. I was showing my son, talk about feeling old, right? I was showing my son. We were talking about Unreal Tournament 2004, and I'm like, dude,
great game.
I was the master at this game. I would turn down the music in the game. I'd have Winamp playing Beethoven, right? I'd have Winamp playing Moonlight Sonata because it got me in the right mood. Right?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
So picture this. I'm in, and I can't remember the name of the map, but it was the Capture the Flag map where you're like on an asteroid.
Okay.
Right? And I would just be perched up, and I would always go to the other side and perch on their tower because they wouldn't expect me up there. And I was doing so many headshots. I was just sniping them from up there. And apparently, so like it'll be like headshot.
Yeah.
Double kill and stuff like that. But apparently, if you do enough kills in succession within a short enough period, the last
kill.
Yeah, but there's more after that.
There's more.
The last one is holy shit.
Oh.
And I would just, that was my goal, is to get it to just keep repeating holy. Like that was all I lived for. And apparently I went to their website. Apparently they were trying to make a new one again. They were coming back out. I don't know.
I saw this recently, and then it was, I wouldn't say recently, but the story, I actually heard it last night. They were talking, Epic had basically two teams. One was working on a new Unreal, and the other was working on Fortnite. And Fortnite just started printing money, and so they said, all right, all you Unreal guys, you're making Fortnite content. Maybe they'll come back around, because I would love to see a UT 2020 whatever, but yeah.
I mean, it would be a 2024 would be good. It'd be a nice 20-year anniversary.
Since we're talking UT, I have to share a fun UT story.
Let's hear it.
So I went to school at the Rochester Institute of Technology. This is nerd haven, if there ever was one. And even back 20 years ago, it was still very much that way. So and we were on the quarter system at the time. I think they're on semesters now. But once a quarter, for 24 hours straight, they would set up, they called it RIT Fest, but it was a big LAN party from noon on Saturday to noon on Sunday. And all sorts of tournaments. But one tournament I remember was where you had to be in a team, and one person with their hands on the keyboard and mouse had to wear a box on their head so they couldn't see the screen, and the other person is behind you, almost like a shoulder massage, and they're trying to guide you to play. This was a team-based Unreal tournament, and I did not do well, but my buddies next to me, one was just using the impact hammer, and he went around and made it to the finals with the impact hammer.
Wow.
It was like free for all, and box on his head, impact hammer, did a great job.
It reminds me of that video where you have like the three people standing, all facing the same direction, and you have the first person that like draws on a piece of paper on the person's back a circle.
Yeah.
They've got to okay, I'm going to draw it, and then you get the final
one.
Yeah, it reminds me of that. Oh man. Well, when we're not playing Unreal Tournament, and I'm sure when you were at RIT, you had to go to class every once in a while.
Once in a while, yeah.
Once in a while. I kind of want to touch on what Fortinet is doing in the training and certification space, because
absolutely,
as we were talking about this, I'm like, is this a good subtopic to bring up? And you kind of made a revelation to me that I was like, wow, okay, that's another game changer. Tell us a little bit more about the NSE program.
Sure. And it actually recently, I think October 1st, the names of the certifications have changed, and sort of the path to the top has sort of changed. But in the early days of the pandemic, Fortinet made all their training free. So you can go to training.fortinet.com, sign up, and the lowest level, like my dog is certified NSE1 cybersecurity, although like I've never seen email before, all the way up to here is, there's a OT. It used to be an NSE7, now it's called something different, but that was like our CCIE equivalent, focused on using Fortinet products in an OT environment. So we have a couple different specializations around that, but because it was all made free, you had to pay if you wanted to take the exam and try and get an actual certification, or if you wanted lab time. Those were the only things that we made paid. But you can watch the videos and read all the content from the lowest level up to, all right, we're unboxing your first FortiGate. Here's how you configure management. Here's how you set up BGP. Here's how you set up vanilla SD-WAN rules. Let's do some firewall policies between them. Turn on the IPS engine, SSL inspect, whatever you want to do. And it's not just for FortiGates. If you wanted to learn about Forti switches or APs or Fortinet, there's training all the way across our product portfolio. So it's really cool.
Nice. And as you said, that all the training, with the exception of the lab time, all the training is provided for free.
Not a lot of stuff is free these days, but today you can go out and learn whatever you wanted about FortiGates or Fortinet products for free from training.fortinet.com. That's a great resource.
Nice. Yeah, I actually I was proud of myself. I got through NSE1. but I will say this, right? I've obviously gone through lots of training, various forms and fashion, right? Whether it's CBT Nugget or Cisco Learning Center or whatever. I forget what it's. I think it's Cisco Learning Center. So I've gone through lots and lots of various trainings, and I have to say, what you guys have put out there is probably some of the most polished stuff I've seen. Like,
well, I appreciate that.
Even at the entry levels, like, definitely a lot of time and care, and it's a very high quality production. It's you mentioned that not a lot of things are free, and the other adage goes, you get what you pay for.
Yeah.
No, this is worth something, and I have to say, very, very impressed with the production quality. Again, I haven't really touched any of the other stuff, so I will eventually get there. I think now that I realized where the NSE 1 falls, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to skip over to NSE 4 then.
Yeah,
especially now that I know I don't have to like go in order.
and I'm being a little tongue-in-cheek here. My dog can't reach the keyboard, but I do think the first couple of NSEs are geared at your more non-technical users. We want to create a level set of what does cybersecurity really mean, because there's users out there that are very non-technical, and security at the end of the day is really everybody's job. Yeah. That was something we used to say. The person who's going to get phished is not going to be. I mean, it might be the network admin. We've seen a lot of ransomwares lately where it is somebody higher up the food chain. But a lot of times they're going after someone who's very non-technical. So security, having that baseline of cybersecurity knowledge is very helpful. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Again, not for nothing. As much as that NSE 1 was probably like, really, what do you?
Right.
I know.
Right.
At the same time, it was. I will say it was a great review, because there are a lot of terms that, especially in this industry.
Oh my God.
Terms matter. Yeah. And it was funny. So my son went to the orthodontist a couple months ago, and it turns out that the orthodontist is actually related to my primary care physician. They're siblings.
Oh, cool.
So, I'm like the only person who knows how to pronounce her last name because I know her brother. And we're talking about stuff, and she's kind of explaining like, here's the concern we have with Ben's mouth, and we want to go with an expander, and here's why we want to do it now. We don't want to wait, et cetera, et cetera. So we're talking back and forth, and I'm throwing some terms at her, and she actually stopped, and she goes, "Are you in the medical industry?" I said, "No, why?" She goes, "Like, you're using the correct terms." I said, "No, I'm in IT. Terms matter there too, so I like to use the right ones." Because I hate when it's like, oh, well, I downloaded my computer the other day, and it said I had an update. Wait, what? Run that by me one more time, and this time use non-technical words, because you don't know how you're doing it wrong.
I was proud. My son used download. He has a little laptop we let him use, and he used it correctly, downloaded something, and he used it. But I've definitely heard your scenario. I was like, "Wow, Logan, you did that? Yeah, okay, I'll help you. Let's get it going."
That's awesome. Yeah, the first computer I got for my son was a Chromebook, because I'm just like, my wife had the MacBook Air, I had my work laptop, and I'm like, if my son is going to break something, I'd rather it be a $250 Chromebook that,
right.
Whether it's malicious or not. If it's accidental, okay. If it's malicious, then we have to have a deeper conversation. But if it's a $1,000 MacBook Air, then that's kind of a problem. But if it's a $250 Chromebook,
right? And those Chromebooks, you can factory reset them so fast these days.
Dude,
so
I was one of the people that actually got an original CR48 from Google. I remember when I got that in the mail, and I'm pretty sure I still have it somewhere, because I won't get rid of it. It hasn't gotten any updates in a long time. It's still semi-usable. The problem was, as time went on and they started adding more features to Chrome OS, the processor and hardware they put in there
can't keep up.
Back down. But
give me your best Indiana Jones. It belongs in a museum.
But it was so cool. I remember I'm like, what the heck is this box? And I open it, and I see these patterns, and I'm like, oh my God, I recognize these patterns. I've seen this, because of course I was on Engadget at the time, and everyone's like, oh, well, Chromebooks were delivered, and this is what they look like. And I'm like, I remember seeing that box. I'm like, oh my God, I got a free laptop from Google. I'm so cool. I'm so important. definitely. And of course, I play with it for a couple weeks. I'm like, all right, how do I hack this thing?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
then they show you where some type of developer switch is located
Right, right.
underneath the batteries, and you can load your own. I'm loading Ubuntu on there.
Yeah,
Like I
let
know
me
what
get
the hell I'm doing.
some shell, you know.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, okay, I got to write this down. SUDO. So it is okay. I have no idea what the hell I'm doing. I'm just, copying and pasting in my head because you can't really copy and paste from one Linux machine to the other. Don't know how to do that. Oh man, I'll tell you this has been more about nostalgia for me than anything else. I mean, it's
Sometimes you need to walk down memory lane to
yeah, I
appreciate
think
how
so.
you got here. I know it was supposed to
Yeah.
be a half Fortinet commercial, half walk down memory lane. Now we're all going to fire up our UT servers and have a death match.
Yes. Yes. LAN party at 12. My house. Let's go.
Okay.
Uh, Too funny. Too funny. But no, I think that's awesome. And again, I think for anyone that's even just starting in IT, or even if you've been in there for a little while, right? Getting that refresher, understanding those terms, those terms matter. The words matter, especially when you're working with other people, especially when it comes to security. You absolutely
Right,
need to
right.
know what you're dealing with, right? Because there is a difference between like a vulnerability and an exploit. There's a meaning behind the term 0-day attack, right? And if they're just thrown around willy nilly and without the proper context, it can slow things down. And especially when you're dealing with this threat landscape that we're seeing every single day, um, it's important that you're not wasting time trying to decipher someone
Yeah,
else's
there's
terms.
no IT Rosetta Stone, unfortunately. Um, but you make a great point. I think that if you take the time to learn the terms, whether it's like you did for your orthodontist, here's a guy who comes in wants to talk to the security team. A lot of times, networking professionals and security professionals can kind of be gatekeepers, and if you come to them on their own terms, I think you'll probably be a lot more, have a lot more pleasant experience. I know OT is another one where I am, boning up on the electrical power and the water terms. They're just things that I've never had to deal with, RTUs and PLCs and ICS,
Mm-hmm.
all those. And if I come to a customer and don't know or start rattling them off and use them incorrectly, don't know what I'm talking about, I'm going to get laughed out of the room. So
Yep.
you make a great point about, let's learn the terminology. It's very accessible, it's free, and could help move your career in the right direction. So
Yeah, and I think I was going through a CISSP training course a while back, and it's funny. So I went to high school at a vocational technical high school.
okay.
And my shop was electrical, and of course I did all that, and I went to college for computer network engineering. But at the same time, that electrical background has
Oh my
been
God, it's got to be
huge for
so
me.
beneficial.
I'm having conversations with a customer right now about what size UPS to get for his switch. He's got an old 4500
Okay.
that's running on 240 volts right now. And we're taking the measurements, we're looking at stuff, and I'm like, well, you're running at 240 volts so that those power supplies can put out like 4200 watts for PoE, but you're literally using 700 watts. We can replace that, and you don't have a UPS on them now, so we can actually plug them into the 120 volt behind you, get you a 120 volt UPS. You're only going to be able to run those power supplies at 2,000 watts each, but that's still more than double what you got.
Plenty, plenty.
And just yesterday, I'm at my parents' house installing thermostats for their electric heaters, and it's that background and understanding of electrical and how it works, and the various terms and stuff like that I think helps make you well rounded.
Hmm.
Whether that's in our line of work where we're working with customers and trying to support the entire solution and ecosystem, or you're the network admin yourself. Like that was a big thing when I was in my K through 12 school district. They were just starting a huge building renovation,
Hmm.
and that included building a new MDF, a new data center closet. And originally everything was wired 120 volts. Every rack had like 2 or 3 giant UPSs, and I'm like,
Wow.
wait a minute, why don't we put a single 3-phase, unit in the corner that can power the entire room?
But
And
someone
call
with
it a day.
no electrical background is probably not gonna. That's probably not gonna be the first thing out of their mouth.
No, no, and why would I want to run 240 volts versus 120? Well, you get higher efficiency.
Yeah.
You're able to run more over the same cables, because when you double the voltage, you cut the amount of current in half, and the wire thickness is everything is, regular outlet can only handle 15 amps. It's less than that, but that's it, right?
Yeah.
14 amps down a thing. At 120 volts, that's roughly 1,800 watts. When you are bumping that up to 240 volts, that's 3,600 watts. That's twice as much without having to change out the wire, just because I bumped up the voltage. And, it makes everything more efficient. It makes everything easier to manage. And you put a bunch of PDUs in there. You got a couple things that can only run 120. You work through that. But I know we're just going off on tangents. I think I should just call this the tangent show. Oh my goodness. But I think, learning these terms, understanding whatever you can do, within your own learning capabilities to be able to make yourself more well-rounded. It's
Yeah.
all
It definitely helps. IT is. I mean, I started and I thought being a Java programmer was going to be the only job in IT, and so I have like a programming background that I almost never. Occasionally I write some Python code or fix somebody's code, but I definitely don't do it as much as I did in the first 10 years of my career. But that's a good, kind of like your electrical background is a good skill to have. I can say, oh, your code is probably doing this. Or when I get to, we didn't even touch on like SOAR or like security automation type things. Those finally programming is pushing itself into the networking space. And I thought REST APIs were going to be the bee's knees, but we're still doing, we've gone from CLI to GUIs. The APIs are there, but it's not. I don't see the uptick or uptake, I guess, on the customer side. Some customers are doing a ton with it. Some people are like, they can't spell API. So
I think I might fall into the latter on that one. It's funny because I actually got into networking to avoid programming. So when things like Cisco DevNet came around, I was like, no, it found me.
And see, I was the opposite. Nobody on my team there was like one other guy who was a whiz. He grew up in the Perl era and he was a Perl wizard. And so when Cisco DevNet came out, him and I were the first ones like, oh, what do you got going on over there? Let's start coding our firewalls and our routers and stuff.
And people like me were like, here, just take the keyboard. Go right ahead. Although I will say, I was very proud of myself. I had a customer who gave me access to their dashboard, and I was able to use Postman. I had to re-download it. I was able to use Postman, figure out how to put in my key and what to actually request, and I was able to download a JSON file, and then from there parse it with Excel to actually get the spreadsheet that I wanted. And it only took me like 45 minutes. About 14, tabs open with with write-ups on how to do this. I'm not sure if ChatGPT helped me out or not. I don't recall on that particular instance, but in most circumstances, especially when it comes to programming, I'm very highly recommending or relying on that one. I think I might have to. I may have to make a shirt that says ChatGPT made this shirt.
Yeah, I'd wear that.
Yeah. Speaking, this is horrible self-promotion, and I'm sorry, Steve, but I have to do it because I said shirt. So you haven't seen this yet.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah, it's kind of outside the camera, but these are
Conf T with your SE.
Conf T with your SE shirts. These are coming soon. I'm super, super stoked because it's something I've wanted to do for a long time. And actually,
you made it to 60 episodes. You might as well have some
60
t-shirts.
60 episodes. I think this is the best time to be able, and 55 minutes into the episode too. We'll bring this up for anyone that made it this far. There'll be a special coupon just for you. But we've also got look at that. It's a nice can shaped beer glass or whatever. Cool. Insert favorite beverage here. So yeah, just a couple items that we're toying around with and looking at. I'd show you the sticker on my laptop, but that would disconnect us. Don't want to do that. But cool stuff. So training and certification, great. Make sure that you take a look at that. I think that's awesome. They said it was training.fortinet.com.
Yes, that's correct.
Awesome. Definitely check that out and become more well-rounded. And I think that's a win-win for everyone. So and one thing I don't think we even mentioned when we were talking about we touched briefly on the FortiGates, and I want to make sure we spend a little bit of time on that because I think I definitely pulled you off on various tangents and, away from the topic at hand. So let's talk a little bit more kind of on the secret sauce that really makes the FortiGates such a hot commodity, and I think a lot of that boils down to the ASICs. But I also believe that there's some cloud management pieces that we can touch on a little bit too, right?
Sure. We'll start with the ASICs. I think on our lower end models, we have the system on a chip. We call it SOC, and I think we're up to SOC 4 or SOC 4. This allows us to not have one of the bigger name chip manufacturers in our devices. You still get the performance that you would expect out of a enterprise network device, but you're also not having a power penalty. These smaller end devices can still do 10 gigabits of firewalling, but they're not going to use they have very low power requirements. So I think it's great that we talked a ton about electricity and all that.
Yeah, I mean, with any type of electricity usage also comes cooling, right? And I think we touched on it with the last episode with Chandler from Pure. He was talking about wherever we can find ways, and especially in the data center, to reduce our energy usage, and that along with the direct energy usage of the devices that we're powering also comes into play cooling. How much are we cooling? How many BTUs do we have to now offset because we're generating 6,000-7,000 BTUs of heat per each device? We have to offset that now with that much or more in cooling and the inefficiencies that arise from air cooling and everything else. So, and of course the environmental impacts as well. So that's cool. So being able to use custom ASICs, your own custom SOCs, you're able
That's
to...
the small models. So as we get bigger, we'll start having more discrete ASICs that are function based. So we have a content processor, network processor, and security processors. So various functions like application identification and inspection, sending traffic to an IPS engine or a DNS filter or a web filter. These and for network processing, it's mostly around IPsec performance offloading and SSL inspection. So to try and get speed gains in these various network activities versus trying to do that all in x86 with software, we get a lot of performance improvement by using our ASIC chips. That's definitely the Fortinet secret sauce.
Yeah, I mean, there's got to be a huge performance hit when you're having to rely on kind of the software as the intermediary to be able to use just kind of off the shelf x86 CPUs. And I don't know if I cleared this question with you, so I might be throwing you a little bit under the bus. But now with manufacturing your own ASICs, that of course comes with its own plethora of issues with supply chain and everything else. How has that the results of the last 3 years kind of affected that? How have you guys been able to weather that?
Well, no company was totally insulated from its supply chain woes. I think during the first half of, so I started Fortinet in 2021, and for the better part of that year, despite being, in the pandemic, we were doing fine. We had a decent amount of supplies, but they eventually hit the same sort of woes that other manufacturers hit, because there's only so many places that will produce those sort of chips and those sort of quantities that you had to you had to get in line with the big customers too. The
Yeah.
Broadcoms of the world that are making everybody's switch chips or everybody's wireless access chips. So
Yeah, I mean, it's I coming from manufacturing, I definitely understand the reasoning, especially from a financial point of view
hmm
for just-in-time manufacturing. But man, oh man, did it show its downfalls
yes,
with the
yes.
supply chain issues. And I mean, I kind of have to keep reminding myself that 2020 was the year that we couldn't get toilet paper. Like,
Oh my God, I learned about Amazon Subscribe and Save, and we were hoarding that stuff. And it wasn't just toilet paper. We're like, oh, we need paper towels is another one,
paper towels,
or
Clorox wipes. They
Clorox.
couldn't make them fast enough because it's the lengthy
There,
process.
my kids love these. They're like a Sesame Street branded Fig Newton. I can't remember who actually make. It's like Earth's Best or Earth's Finest, something like that. But it's like looks like a little Fig Newton with strawberry in it, but it's got Elmo on the box. And those things became so difficult to find. It was like, oh, ShopRite's got 10 of them. I'm just buying all of them, you know?
I mean, I remember as recently as the last couple months trying to get Tylenol, children's Tylenol.
Really?
Yeah, I
I,
went
I,
to
yeah, you know
four
what?
stores.
I went to Walgreens a couple nights ago because we happened to be out of Tylenol, and there was two on the shelf, and I'm like, I got to take them both. I'm sorry for the next guy, but
I mean, when you don't know, when you're in a situation where you're used to just being like, okay, I'll just go to the store, and you
yeah,
can go
yeah.
to any number of stores, and there it is, and you recognize it because it's in the same packaging, and the prices may fluctuate, but you can trust what it is, you can trust it'll be there. To then, I have no idea where I'm going to get this. I'm going to hop between store to store. They're talking about the same issues with shortages with the amoxicillin, which blows my mind because there was a shortage last year and they didn't fix it. But I'm
Unbelievable.
not going to get into that conversation because this is not the podcast for that. I think we'll have to make some secret podcast channel where we can complain about all that stuff. But the point of all that being that
Yeah, back to the FortiGates and their secret sauce.
yeah, you don't need Tylenol if you have a FortiGate though. So
If you're
that's
sick, you can run your queries through the FortiGate. It'll be fast, efficient, and secure, and you can find out where the closest children's Tylenol is in your.
oh my god. I love how you keep me on track there, Steve. I think that's great.
Trying.
Someone has to. Someone has to. Tom used to do it, but he's not. He's not with us, so he can't do it anymore. Hi, Tom. I miss you.
I'm lucky. I remember what the thread was. 4 or 5 threads ago.
It's like, wait, are we still playing Unreal Tournament?
Yeah, yeah.
But I think all that to say that the supply chains I think hit everyone, and I think it's still affecting people, right? Whereas, things just take a long time to move through, and there's so many moving parts. A major disruption like what we've seen over the last
hmm
3 years really it messes with everything, and it takes a while to shuffle out of that. But the whole point of my initial question is that things are looking up, things are working through those
Yeah.
backlogs and stuff like
There
that.
there was a period where, and it hasn't been for a while, but where and Fortinet wasn't alone. I could not really get a high-end access point, and high-end at
Yeah,
the time was like a Wi-Fi 6,
right.
um, and nobody could because
No,
we were getting calls that we would never have gotten. Hey, so such and such vendor can't get me access points. What can you get me? And
no.
unfortunately, a lot of us were using the same chips under the covers, so yeah.
Yeah, you really you really find out what's going on when that happens. But no, we got the same stuff. I mean, I definitely saw it. It was just like, hey, I need this because I'm doing something. Like I need this hardware. I need something. You need to get me something. And they would shop around, and understandable, right?
Right.
I mean, that's goes back to our Tylenol thing. That's when you start looking at the store brand.
Right. I'm gonna okay, acetaminophen, that equals
Yep.
Tylenol. Yeah.
Yep. Exactly. Exactly. Oh man. So about the cloud management piece, because I know that that's
Sure.
something that I'm not too familiar with. Haven't really got a chance to look at the dashboards or play with it. But kind of give me a rundown on what you guys are doing in that space and where the benefits are.
In terms of management, we'll call it central management. A lot of Gartner things use the single pane of glass, and I don't like that term. But central management or central logging, because we have a logging product as well, we can run it either discrete hardware, VMs on your network VMs in a public cloud, or let Fortinet host it as like a SaaS offering, basically. So we have options depending on how you want to grow your network. Um, what I like about FortiManager is you can kind of templatize your devices. So I mean, how many times when we were shelling into a firewall or a router did we have to change the trusted hosts or the host that could SSH in? Now I have 100 firewalls. I want to change it all. I can change that from a single point, or I can add SNMP v3 from a single point. Where that was a nice simple things like make sure they all have the same DNS servers, make sure they all have the same time servers. This is blocking and tackling, but it's stuff that, when it goes out of sync is a big problem, and a lot of times it's goes undiagnosed for a little while.
Yep.
um,
Yep.
so I think that piece to templatize your network, and that's the foundation, the system level things. If you want to templatize everything up to your SD-WAN BGP settings and IPsec settings, you can say, all right, my data center hubs, this is how they're configured, and all of my branches, we can say, all right, branch number one, your third octet is one, and make it kind of like a variable there. And as you start adding branches, they just pick up the next octet. The IKE and IPsec settings all come from FortiManager templates, the BGP settings, what networks we're going to advertise, who we can communicate with, basic level policies. So for me, having worked in a time when you had to shell into a whole bunch of different firewalls to make changes, that's you can still do it if you want to, but you don't have to
Right.
anymore.
Right. Yeah. No, I remember the whole copy paste, copy paste.
Yeah, yeah.
And there was some great, what is it, was it Royal TS, a tool, I think, a tool I used, where you'd have multiple, I think, no, Royal TS was for like remote desktop, but you could do like multi-tab putty, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Where you
Secure CRT was one that I
Yeah,
used a
that's another
lot.
one. Yep. Where you just have all the tabs open. You just be hopping
hmm
between device to the other, and this one timed out. Let me hit enter and put in my password again.
And so you could
So
use FortiManager, but if you're a shop that's heavily invested in Ansible, then we have a Ansible playbook that you can grab and tweak to your settings to, spin up a FortiGate with, and it's the same. It's going to come out the same every time because you're using an Ansible playbook. There's a lot of different automation scenarios depending on where you are in your automation life cycle. Some people, it's a dirty word, and some people are like, oh, that's the first thing out of their mouth is, do you support Ansible? So,
yeah, no, that's awesome. I think I have to say, I think I'm very impressed. Again, I think when we initially talked and we're kind of planning this episode, I did not realize just how many products and areas Fortinet was
mhm.
in. Having of course heard about the firewalls and the custom ASICs and kind of being like, that's the thing you're known for. At the end of the day, you guys are doing quite a lot of things, and maybe one of the best kept secrets in IT in terms of what you guys can do. So definitely worth a look, and more research in it. Again, absolutely training. I think that's so cool, because again, that whole NSC one, I don't even think it was about the Fortinet products at all. It was just
No,
about,
no, it's really just about the cybersecurity landscape. Yeah.
yeah, it's just about the landscape itself. And I think having that foundational support, whether you're going to start there and go through and go down the NSE 4, 5, 6, and 7, great. But if you just don't know where to start at all, it's a great place to start, or a great place just for review. Again, high quality production. It makes my podcast look very
Okay.
shameful. My background is just too busy. That's the problem. But no, this has been a lot of fun. And Steve, I appreciate you going down memory lane with me and roads of
My
nostalgia.
pleasure. my definitely my pleasure. Thank you for taking
I
me
hope
there.
we gave you enough time to talk about Fortinet, as you know, between our various trail offs here. But no, really appreciate your time, and I'll just offer the opportunity for you if there's any last minute thoughts that you'd like to share before we wrap things up here.
I think one last time, training.fortinet.com if you want to learn more about Fortinet and its offerings. If you're in the New England area, the CT Network Users Group, I don't know when the next one's going to be. It's probably not going to be till 2024 at this point, but that was a
They
fun
do this
time.
quarterly?
I think it's quarterly, yeah.
I thought it was. Okay. Let's ask Igor.
But CT Network Users Group, come to the next one and have a beer with Bryan and I. It'll be a good
Yeah,
time.
no, definitely, definitely. I mean, it's we said it before when we kind of got together. We feel it's pretty rare to run into someone, especially in Connecticut.
Yeah.
And
You're
it's funny
caught
because
between the gravity of Boston and New York. There's a lot there's a
yeah,
lot going on in Connecticut.
there's always something going on in Connecticut. So yeah, if you're in the area, want to join the next CT Nug, I'm sure we'll when we know the date, I'm sure I'll put it up here. Steve, I'm throwing you on the spot here. Will you join the Discord channel to be to interact with
Absolutely.
our listeners? Awesome.
As a
So
pro gamer, of course I have Discord,
of course you're on Discord. So yeah, we are getting the Discord channel up and running. First of all, thank you to the listeners that have joined recently. I noticed right after we announced it, started seeing some people kind of come in there. Still a little quiet, some crickets going on, but that's all right. You know, we gotta find something to talk about. But Steve's gonna join. We've got our other previous guests on there to talk about any of those topics as well. Give my takeaway here is give Fortinet a shot here. Let's take a look at their portfolio and see if there's something that's of interest there. Obviously, their FortiGate product definitely well known for its throughput in terms of dollars per gig or whatever you want to call it. Right?
Or watts per. The price performance ratio is you're
There you go.
you're not going to beat that. Come
Yeah.
for the FortiGates, stay for all the other things that Fortinet has to offer in this portfolio.
I like that. I like that. I think it's the perfect line to wrap it up with. So on that note, remember, join the Discord, discord.conft.show. And thanks for listening. And until next time, stay safe out there. Don't forget to save that config.